Hola amigos de Wine News TV Puerto Rico, me encuentro en el almacén del vino de B. Fernández con un amigo, no solo un winemaker, un genial winemaker, sino un amigo, Donald Patz. It's so good to have you finally in person in front of our camera for our viewers. I was just saying that more than with a winemaker, I feel that I'm with a friend. We've been in touch for a couple of years now. I've enjoyed your wines since you were making them for Patz and Hall. We're going to touch on that for a bit, and then obviously about the present, Maritana and their beautiful wines. So first of all, for our viewers who perhaps have been living in another planet and have not heard the name Patz as it relates to Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, tell me a little bit about your career.
Well, it started a long time ago. I've been in the wine business now 40 years, which is kind of shocking when I say it out loud. But probably the most important part of my career was with the company I started in 1988 with James Hall called Patz and Hall. And we focused initially just on Chardonnay. And then we branched into Pinot Noir in 1995 and made Chardonnay and Pinot Noir both sort of regional blends, but also single vineyard wines. And single vineyard wines was sort of the signature of what we did. So we made single vineyard wines from as far south as Monterey County and all the way up to Mendocino County, but focusing mostly on Sonoma and Napa Valley.
Did the soil, the terroir, the place where you and your former partner decided to make the wine, make you choose the varietals, or were you both fans of Chard and Pinot?
Well, first of all, we made wines that we liked.
Right.
But when we first started, one of the key things was we had to be able to sell the wine in about 12 months after we made it. So making Cabernet was just right out. That was at least a 2-year project. We just didn't have the money to do it. So Chardonnay was really an obvious choice. We liked Chardonnay. We thought we had a vision for Chardonnay that would be interesting, and also it fit our budget.
Yeah.
And then moving into Pinot Noir was a really interesting time. And I think that those people, if you're more familiar today or you just started enjoying wines more recently, you probably don't know the history, but there was a time where California Pinot Noir would have been the last thing I would have chosen on a wine list because the wines just weren't that great.
Wow.
And then about the middle of the 1990s, things started to change radically. Better vineyards were coming online, a lot better selection of Pinot Noir clones, which I think was really a critical change that happened. But replanting from old sites that were warm, really much too warm for growing great Pinot Noir, and moving them further west, especially in Sonoma, where the climate was a little bit cooler and the soils, I think, superior for Pinot Noir. Transformed Pinot. It went from being the last thing I would have chosen to one of the first places I look on wine lists. And we just happened to be looking to do a red wine. We liked Pinot Noir. We obviously, if you are a Pinot Noir fan, then you're also a fan of red Burgundies.
Right.
So having experienced that and seeing that there was an opportunity to try new places and do something different as opposed to simply making another Napa Valley Cabernet was really what drove us. And we were lucky enough to find a couple of people that were in Sonoma County especially that were interested in growing Pinot Noir at that level and understood what it was going to take to make the quality of wine that we wanted. So
going back a bit to the past, and that's the last question, then we go into Maritana and the present, and we'll taste the wines. So did you grow up exposed to wine, like in your home? Did you have an uncle or your parents? Like, how did you fall in love with wine?
Exactly the opposite of that. My parents were teetotalers. They never drank at all. And I think my first I was curious about it. I worked in grocery stores when I was in high school and college. So I would see these whole wine selections. And so I was curious about why were there so many and what was going on with all these labels, and began reading a little bit about it. But my first real opportunity to try wines was when I went to Europe in 1975. And I got a chance to try wines in Italy a little bit. And it was just fascinating to me. I guess that there are things that just catch your attention at certain points in your life, and definitely wine was one of those. I didn't really think it was going to be a career. I thought it would be more of a hobby or something like that. But the further down the road I got, the more I realized this is something I really wanted to do and be involved with in terms of the winemaking and presenting it to the world.
Can you recall that first love, either region, varietals, type of wine? If it's Italy, what was it? A Chianti? Was it a Barolo?
Well, it wasn't really. You're asking about that epiphanal moment, in wine, which is different.
Did it happen for you later on?
Oh, of course. And I think there were two of them. So I'm going to tell you about two of them because I'm a California guy and my whole career has been in California. But one of them was the sort of obvious, especially if you're a Pinot lover. A friend of mine ran a retail store in Eugene, Oregon, and when I was living there, and he had some wines that he wanted to use for a wine dinner, so he brought his wine club together, and we drank. In one night, we had 1969 La Tâche from Domaine della Romanée-Conti, and it was probably, this had to have been 80, 83.
So it was 14-year-old.
So it wasn't super old.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. And it really lit me up, and I realized, especially Pinot Noir could be at a whole new plane that I'd never experienced.
That's an epiphany for sure.
It was, and it's sort of one of those ones where you look back and go, no kidding, Donald, 1969, one of the greatest vintages in Burgundy, and one of the greatest producers. I mean, how hard was that to come up with?
But it's like if your first girlfriend was Cindy Crawford.
Yeah, right? Kind of, yeah. And then, but for me, there was a Chardonnay too. And it's not the Chardonnay I probably would choose to drink today, but at the time it was so dramatic and so different. And unfortunately, this winery has been sold and the wines are really they're a pale comparison to what they used to be. But in like 1980, the Chalon winery released their 1978 vintage. And it was unlike any Chardonnay I'd ever had.
Of course.
It came in a Chardonnay tasting of other California wines. The others came out, blub, 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 blub. Then you poured the Chalon, it goes out, blub, blub. You could visibly see a difference in the wine. And the wine was explosively rich in it. Not necessarily the style I want to drink today, but wow, it was so dramatic and amazing that it was really inspiring.
Thank you for sharing that. So when you let's go to Maritana.
Sure.
Tell me about the project. I love the name. When we first met virtually, I asked about the name, and it kind of takes me to the ocean and the currents. And Maritana has a. Let's start with the name, and then tell me about how the project came to be.
Well, it's funny because when you start a new wine project, trying to come up with a name is one of the more difficult things because so many names that are sort of obvious or really beautiful or descriptive have already been used. And so for me, Maritana is a combination of two words that I think remind me of Sonoma in particular. So oceans and mountains. Oceans became maritime, mountains became Montana. Maritana.
Love it. That's where it comes from.
And it sounds Spanish.
Maritana.
Yeah.
It sounds lovely. It sounds like the name of an island in Ibiza.
Yes.
Let's go to the island of Maritana. Private island with a nice hotel. It's like, they could shoot the next season of that White Lotus show at the Maritana resort or something.
It sounds
like
great.
An Italian. It sounds like an Italian exotic vineyard. Villa. Close to, I don't know, Amalfi Coast. Let's go to the Maritana Coast.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the wine. So you make Chard and you make Pinot Noir here. Tell me a little bit about this one. Oh my God, this is the one that I love. Tell me about this one that we have here.
Well, I just sort of in general, I really focused just on Russian River because I was starting this new project all by myself, and you have limited personal time to be able to do things. I didn't have time to run all the way up to Mendocino or all the way down to the Central Coast in California. So I wanted one small area that I could focus on that I believed really had superior soils and abilities of the farmers to farm these vineyards for the Maritana project. And so Russian River was what I chose. And I was very fortunate. I've got a long time friendships with some of the top growers in Russian River because of the previous company. And this is what we're tasting is one of the single vineyard designates that I do. This is a Dutton Ranch site. It is the only remaining piece of their original plantings. It's called Shot Block, and it was planted in 1967. And so I wanted to make sure that every time somebody gets a chance to taste this wine, they remember it was planted in 1967. So I added 1967 to the name. So it's Shot Block.
It's awesome. Cheers, my friend. Thank
1967.
you. I love how rich and explosive the nose is. There's lots of things happening here. Spice. I love the like lemon oil note to it, and there's something that takes me a bit to ginger or something gorgeous like orange zest, citrus fruit and flowers.
Exactly. Almost like citrus fruits are really fun because there's a variety of them. You know, everything.
They can be red, they can be orange, they can be green, they can be yellow.
Yeah. For me, this is producing a little bit of a tangerine note this morning.
Yeah, tangerine. Yeah. And then it feels clean as well.
Well, what I've done is I've really changed the program. It's not really, my previous company 2.0. This is starting from scratch, wiping the slate clean, and making wines that I want to drink today. And that means Chardonnays that are brighter and crisper and fresher, exactly the opposite probably of that 78 Chelone.
The acidity is gorgeous. Wow, this is an amazing bottle of wine.
Well, it's also 2017, and so we're looking at a wine that is not just recently been bottled, and I love the way that the wine is developed. I'm really proud of the fact that these wines have been set up so that they taste good when they're released, but they also have the ability to gain complexity over time.
What I like about your wines is that they're aromatic, they have very good structure, but they feel very graceful, like very elegant. They know how to carry their weight. They know how to carry because all of your wines come from very, very well-known vineyards, extremely good fruit, and that can produce sometimes over ripeness or chunkiness or disjointed wines just because of the sheer power. But it's either you pick earlier or your incredible hands, but they feel, bold, big, but very graceful, very elegant wines, very balanced.
I like that description, and I think that one of the things I'm trying to do in the vineyard is to produce grapes that when they come to the winery, I don't have to do a lot of additions or manipulations. It's not like I'm trying to make natural wines in terms of the sort of nebulous definition around that, but I really like the fact that grape juice by itself, if you pick the grapes at the proper place, have all the components to create a complete and stable wine that has a character signature to it as well.
What do you pair this back at home in terms of food?
Well, my favorite one is the West Coast has a species of crab called Dungeness crab. And when it's in season, which it's still in season right now in California, that's my favorite. I think Dungeness crab. I actually think that God, when He was creating Dungeness crabs, was also thinking about California Chardonnay.
Creating Chardonnay.
Yeah, Chardonnay's coming along. Just wait a couple million years.
Last question before we get into the Pinot, because not often do you get to sit down with a Jedi Master in wine. And this is a huge, general, very broad question, but in general terms, pardon the repetition of words, but how would you compare and contrast Burgundy Chard vis-a-vis California Chardonnay? I know it's a huge question.
Well, yeah, we could probably do a whole series of things just on the discussion between Burgundy and California Chardonnay, but I think that as I view Burgundy, it's a fairly narrow beam of styles. They're pretty close together. There's a few outliers. The California Chardonnay is a really big spectrum, all the way from ultra tart, no oak, super ultra clean, to really ripe, very alcoholic, lots of new barrels, and sweet. and you don't see those outliers ever in Burgundy.
Okay.
But I think that one of the things that is interesting to me is that in France, they're not really looking to make fruity wines. They don't want their wines to smell fruity. They want them to smell minerally or floral or spicy.
Or funky.
Sometimes funky. There's a few in those in California too.
Okay.
But yeah, and so the idea of having this ultra fruity Chardonnay in Burgundy is just not what they're shooting for, and that is a style in California. So I don't really think of myself as trying to make white Burgundy, but I think that because I'm using the white grape and we're using sort of traditional techniques, that it becomes sort of an echo, a California repeat of what they do in Burgundy. I think that we have gorgeous fruit, amazing opportunity to continue to develop style in California that's internationally attractive.
It is. Let's go into the Pinot Noir. So this
Yes,
is
sir.
the Sonoma County Martarella.
Marta. It's actually, I believe the name comes from two grandmothers' names.
Yeah, Marta is my mom.
Marta and Ella.
Oh, I
And
love
so
it.
it became
Martarella.
Marta Ella.
Yeah.
It looks like it might be Spanish, but I don't think they pronounce it that way.
You are totally right with what you said off camera about this being the bigger brother than what we had last night.
Yes.
We had dinner last night. As I said at the beginning, we're friends. And yesterday we had an amazing, it was Jenkins, right?
Yes, it was the Jenkins Ranch last night.
Jenkins Ranch last night.
And this is Marta
is
Ella Vineyard. Marta Ella Vineyard is it's the home ranch for Benovia Winery, and they are gracious enough to sell me a little bit of fruit every year. And in 2018, I got 3 different parcels actually from them, very small amounts of each. But this is one of those. This is 100% clone 943, which is one of the Dijon clones, where the shop block is actually, who knows what clones were in there, planted in 1950, nobody cared about that, or 1967, nobody really cared about what the clones were. When this was planted, they were obsessed with getting the right clones, and clone 943 is a very small producing clone, very intense, beautiful color, and I think a classic California Pinot aromas, this very perfumey.
this Pinot
cherry.
takes me to Christmas season. The spice, the nutmeg, the cinnamon, all that.
Well, there's almost that, yeah, and this is going to sound weird, but there's almost like I agree with Christmas. It's almost like there's a pine note in there too, in a really pleasant sort of background.
Yeah, it's a lovely nose. I mean, but it's definitely bigger or more expressive or more masculine, if you will, than what we had last night.
I think we're allowed to say that still.
Yeah,
But-
exactly. Now my wife said, "Don't say that; they're gonna cancel you." Masculine and feminine can be big too. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for that. Like, it's my show. I love the nose. Yeah, but it also has the, I don't know if it's soy or some minerality, blood or iron. There's something here besides the spice and the red fruit, which is very present. It's something that comes from the roots, like rhubarb. There's something that comes from the forest floor. There's some earthiness laden with the fruit and the spice. Like, I love that. Is this like extreme weather conditions? Like, does the vine suffer here? Because I get something that comes directly from the soil.
No, I don't think the vines suffer specifically, but it because they're producing very small numbers of clusters and very tiny clusters. I think that that energy of the plant gets driven into these in a way that maybe some of the more prolific versions of Pinot Noir would not experience. But I think it's a signature of the place.
It's gorgeous.
What you're talking about.
It's got a lot of fruit, a lot of spice, but then there's complexity to it.
I think that I would love to try this wine again in 15 years. I mean, and it just sounds crazy when you say that about Pinot Noir, especially Pinot Noir from California. But I really believe this has all the pieces to make a fascinating wine with a lot of bottle age. And it's not required. I mean, certainly it can be consumed today with great pleasure, but I'm curious about how it's going to be as an old wine.
I know what it is. I know what I was smelling. Salinity. There's a lovely acidity and salinity, like some saltiness to it that's gorgeous. Like sometimes, and now it has become a fashion. Like you eat salted chocolate or salted caramel. There's something gorgeous that dries up the palate and makes you want to go for another glass or two more glasses or a whole bottle. Like it dries you up, has a little bit of the amato, like that drying sensation. But this salinity, this beautiful saltiness to it, what is that?
I don't know. That's the fun part about wine is that we're not obviously adding.
Maybe it doesn't have it there. Maybe it's that I brushed my teeth an hour ago, but I feel the lovely acidity because on the nose, like you're going to say, oh, it's going to be a sweet wine because it's very powerful, very aromatic. Sometimes you have these wines on the nose, they smell gorgeous, then you drink them and, oh, it's sweet. But here, so elegant and savory.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for, savory.
I think that's a great word for it. That for both of these, actually for all wines that I work with, the one sort of underlying tenet that I think is really important is that each wine brings a level of refreshment as well.
Yep.
It's really easy to be super dramatic and sort of dominant and to the point where it becomes heavy or tedious. But there should be something in them that just makes you feel uplifted, not pushed down, but brought up and refreshed. And each sip makes it a little more refreshing. Each bite of food seems like it's calling for that next sip of wine.
That's what I'm super gastronomic. They're incredibly gastronomic. So from Maritana, reds and whites, you make 4 whites and 4 reds, is it? Or
it changes a little bit. Right now I'm doing 3 single vineyard Chardonnays plus a Russian River blend called La Riviere.
Which is amazing. They sell it here at Almacén del Vino.
It's really good. I'm thrilled with it. We use the highest, it's the same winemaking. We use the highest quality grapes for all of these. The single vineyard wines are more like soloists.
Yeah.
And then I have a little ensemble that comes together with the blends. And I do it in a similar blend with Pinot Noir called La Rousse. So if you speak French, now you know it's Russian River, and I called one of them Russian and the other River
La Riviere, in French. La Rousse.
Yes. And then I'm doing, sometimes I've done 4 different single vineyards, but right now I'm focusing on 3 separate single vineyard Pinots as well. So total of 8 different options. Not all of them are always available, but yeah, that's what we're working on.
To wrap up the interview, let's speak about Puerto Rico. I know you love it here. You WhatsApp me with pictures, and you say you've been here a couple of times. We're a small island, as you know. We're part of the U.S., proud American territory here. But we have a very, very sort of unique wine atmosphere, wine market. We have an influence from all parts of the world. How would you describe coming here? How would you describe the crowds, the people you interact with, and the wine market in Puerto Rico in general?
Well, you're absolutely right. I love coming here. It's I have this sensation of almost coming home in a weird way. I mean, sitting outside at one of the cafes and watching the people go by, it just feels so comfortable and joyful to be here. Which is kind of a funny way to say it, I suppose. But I think one of the cool things, and actually I had some of the same thing when I was first getting interested in wine in Oregon, where there was a little tiny local producers, but it wasn't anything like it is today. And so you felt like you were open to the world, like you could try any wine from the world, and it was, almost like your new friends that just happen to live across the street or something like that. And I love that. And I think that's what wine is all about, really, is the diversity is what makes it so much fun. And it's clear that the diversity has been embraced here. And I think it makes sense that Spanish wines are a big deal and South American wines are a big deal. You can see it when you just walk around here. Yeah. But we're glad to have you as part. We're thrilled to have this be part of America too, of the United States, and so I'm glad that you're embracing California wines.
And when you interact with the local consumers, would you consider them like savvy, curious, aficionados, as opposed to other parts of the world?
Well, I think that
educated.
Yeah, I think that what you're asking is actually it's an interesting question, but frankly, you see all of those people here, and you see all of those people wherever you go. There's people that are just barely interested in wine, in any market that you visit. And then there are people that are super sophisticated and have massive wine cellars and have invested, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars in wines from around the world. And I would say that the people that I've met in Puerto Rico have all been as sophisticated as I would have expected in any other important market.
And then you have also the bloggers, geeks who drink wine for free. And
I've never met any of them.
Talking heads, right?
You know any of them?
Mi gente, qué placer hablar con Donald Patz. Vengan a probar estos vinos Maritana, los consiguen en el almacén del vino de B. Fernández. Donald y yo vamos a hacer otra nota de los Cabernet espectaculares que hacen. Gracias por vernos. Recuerda darle la campanita, suscribirte para que recibas todo nuestro contenido. Y por favor, si te gusta el Chardonnay y el Pinot Noir, este señor que está aquí es de los mejores. Es Lionel Messi of Pinot Noir, maybe?
Oh.
That famous soccer player.
Yeah, I know who he is.
Mi gente, gracias por ver. Cheers, my friend. Amazing, amazing note. Salud.